ask you right away, are you en route to a sports book right now to make sure you've got all your money invested in the Broncos' future because they've picked up Flacco?
No, I think I'll pass on that one. I mean, but I guess it is an upgrade over what they've had the last couple of years. I mean, it's got to be, right?
So that's the question. Is he an upgrade over Case Keenum for next year? I'm not convinced he is.
How many games did they win this year? 6, 7?
I think they won. Well, I think they won 6, and they probably could have had 8 if they had a head coach. But one of the peanut vendors was the head coach, and that didn't work out very well.
Well, I mean, I said upgrade. I didn't say a major upgrade. I mean, but I think there's a little. Flacco's not that bad. I mean, there's a lot of teams that could improve with Flacco at quarterback. I mean,
they better find a way to protect him because the guy he can't move anymore.
There's no offensive line and no weapons.
No.
They just put $28 million into the quarterback position.
I don't like it.
Go Elway, go.
I'll find out from Kelly. She's a Broncos fan. She didn't mention a thing about it this morning when we were doing the video. So that'll give. There was no excitement level there whatsoever. All right. Brent is, of course, with sportsmemo.com. Some really talented handicappers at that site. Brent is as good as it gets in college basketball. So let's talk a little bit about. Well, first let's talk about last night a bit before we look at tonight's games. What do you take out of the LSU victory on the road against Kentucky? Forget the controversial ending because it was a great game nonetheless, and certainly a good game for LSU. How good is this team?
I think they're very good. I mean, Kentucky was playing as good as anybody in the country. I mean, other than Tennessee's been great in the SEC, Kentucky's right there with them. But I mean, that stuff like that happens. I mean, you're going to lose a game, and you're not going to play 100 at your best at every game. So it's not a surprise that LSU was able to win the game in Rupp Arena. But I think LSU's talented. I mean, you saw it last night. I mean, their guards beat Kentucky's guards off the dribble. And I mean, the one thing that Kentucky's done so well lately is play defense. And last night LSU was able, like I said, they got to the rim whenever they wanted. They, very impressive performance defensively. And I think that's the thing with LSU. If they can play defense, then that's going to determine how far they go in the NCAA tournament. We know they can score, but they got to play defense. They showed last night they're capable of it, but it's not something that they've hung their hat on so far this year like Kentucky has.
Well, another thing LSU has shown is they can win games in hostile environments. And then we got to shift to tonight. We have to talk about the Tennessee-South Carolina game because Tennessee is the number one team that they're an afterthought.
Well, they don't have the history, but they're just so athletic and so talented, and I mean, they're a legit. I guess Brent, they're a legit team. I mean, this is a team that on paper can get to the Final Four. I don't know if Rick Barnes gets them there because he's not the greatest big game coach of all time, at least at his prior stops. But on paper, they're really, really good.
Yeah, they are. I mean, and they go about 7 deep, and all 7 guys can play, and a lot of times. College basketball, you get top 25 teams, you got 4 good guys or 5, but Tennessee's got 7. They have 3 or 4 guards that they're interchangeable, and then of course Grant Williams, Player of the Year in the SEC last year, maybe again this year, plus Admiral Schofield, very versatile guy, and you've got some size with Kyle Alexander. So I think you're right. The reason that nobody's talking about them is because they don't have that pedigree that Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, Michigan State does. It's Tennessee. 2 years ago they were a 500 team. 3 years ago they were way below 500. And Tennessee is, I was going to say a football school, but that's not true anymore.
No, but Phil Fulmer.
They're the new kids on the block, and Coach Barnes is, like you said, doesn't have a lot of history of success in the tournament. He's a winning coach, and he's a great guy. I mean, he really is a nice guy, and I pull for him. But and I'm hoping that he finally makes some noise in the tournament because, I mean, the SEC, Kentucky's always dominated. It seems like, and for Tennessee, they've had good teams, but it's been a while. But you're right, they are definitely a legit top 5 team in the country.
So a tricky spot tonight is they're big favorites against South Carolina, and certainly it's a game they're almost certainly going to win. The spread could be another story, however, because even though they've talked about it, and that's it indicates they're aware of it, it's still a look-ahead spot for Tennessee with that huge game at Kentucky coming up.
It definitely is. I mean, and there may have been some of that with Kentucky last night. That I don't think Kentucky played to their abilities last night, and there maybe was a little look ahead to Tennessee, and now you may have that with Tennessee tonight. And South Carolina's dangerous. I mean, I saw South Carolina go to Michigan back in December, and they kept it close, which at the time nobody was doing against Michigan. And South Carolina also was able to score against a really good Michigan defense. And South Carolina, this is not – when you think of Frank Martin, you think of defense and toughness and – you don't think of 72 possessions a game and running up and down the court and not playing good defense, but that's what this team is. They're very young. They're athletic. They're not that great on offense, but they do play fast. They get up and down the court, and they've shown that they can score against some good defenses. Now, of course, the last time they played one was at Kentucky. They scored 48 points against Kentucky. So, they're not as talented as Tennessee by any stretch. Tennessee should win the game, but if they overlook them, I mean, it could be close. I mean, we've already seen Tennessee against Alabama. It was a very close game. They could have very easily lost that one to Alabama in Knoxville a few weeks ago. So you've got to be focused in the SEC. You saw that last night with Kentucky. You saw it with Duke against Louisville. You talk about a game. There was another one last night, but I couldn't bet Tennessee here because of that spot, and also just because. Like I said, like with Kentucky, they played so well for so long. You're due a letdown every now and then. This may be the perfect scenario for Tennessee to have one.
When we talk about home court advantages and how much a home court is worth, that can really change from year to year, and especially if you look over a 3 or 4 or a 5 year span. Auburn's home court back in the day wasn't worth anything. Auburn's home court right now might be the single worth more than any home court in college basketball, as much as any. Let me ask you this. How much of an adjustment have you made in your ratings for the Auburn home court in the Bruce Pearl era, and what do you think of their chances to cover 8.5 against Ole Miss tonight? Total 151.5.
Well, I agree with you completely. I think that I've made an adjustment for Auburn every year in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, the home court keeps getting stronger. Of course, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there was no demand for tickets. There was no crowds. The students didn't come. There was no reason to. Auburn sucked at basketball. And then there was no excitement. They kept hiring guys like Tony Barbie and Cliff Ellis. Cliff Ellis was there for a long time. Who was the other guy that they had? Nobody was going to bring any excitement. I thought when Auburn hired Bruce Pearl, he didn't have a clean record when they hired him. And a lot of people, if that would have been Kentucky, they would have been lambasted for hiring Bruce Pearl. How could you do that? But with Auburn, nobody cared, basically. And I thought, well, this is the best hire they've ever made, because there's one thing Bruce Pearl will do, and that's to generate some excitement, and he has certainly done that. And he doesn't have NBA players. He's got some good players, some really good players, but it's not like he's Calipari with all these NBA one and dones. I mean, he's got some talent, but he's done a great job of getting them to play hard. And most importantly, he is really. It's not just that we're good, and the students said, hey, we're going to go watch them. Bruce Pearl's been out with the students, buying them pizza and coffee and stuff, and made the team. The team, like I think it was 2 years ago, they won a game. It was right when they were starting to get good. And after the game, all the players went into the stands and shook hands with the students and the fans. I mean, who does that? But what it's done is generated a really strong home court advantage. And it's unbelievable. This, somewhere around Christmas, a buddy of mine, we were talking about going to see a game. I looked it up on StubHub thinking, $30, $40 for a ticket. No, it was like $120. Wow. I mean, the demand is unreal. I would have never imagined that for an Auburn college basketball game.
That's really interesting stuff. I mean, that's shocking.
Well, I mean, it talks about a home court that was worth a point and a half. Yeah. It might be worth 5.5 now.
I think it's great.
I would think so.
I love it. And that's we were talking about this earlier, Brent, before you came on. That's why UNLV's got to hire Patino. Just go get him. He's not getting a Big 5 conference shot. No, I mean, I know Bruce Pearl has a checkered past as well, but. Yep. But he can put a program on the map. He can make them relevant. And, boy, does UNLV need relevance. And Rick Pitino's available. Go get him. Just go get him. It'll work in the long run. Look, I don't know. Maybe Bruce Pearl will do something wrong at Auburn, too, because he has a tendency to do that. But by the time it happens, Auburn's going to be a nationally prominent team. and that'll set them up for their next coach. It's a win-win situation. I love what Auburn's done, and I love it that the program has become viable. I think that's a great thing. Here's another program that this was the opposite. Florida's always been a football school. And then along comes Billy Donovan, and they're not just a football school anymore. They still are a football school, but they were great in college basketball. Two national championships. Billy Donovan's an exciting guy. Whoever followed him was going to have a tough job. Michael White, I think, did well early on, but something isn't going well right now for this Florida team. I can tell you on the court, their offense stinks, okay? It's absolutely flat out stinks. No creativity. They don't have any movement. It's just bad. I don't think they're going to be an NCAA tournament team, and that is a big flop for a team that was at least projected to be in the tournament. They'll be facing a Vanderbilt tonight that's hungry to get that first conference win. It's been a tough go for them. They lost their best player early in the season, and it really made a huge difference. But Florida's got to be careful tonight because at this point, Vandy might want it more.
Well, I thought Vanderbilt against Arkansas played their hearts out. I think it was 2 games ago. I mean, they led throughout the first half. Arkansas took the lead in the second half. It looked like, okay, it's going to be a blowout. Vanderbilt fought back and then lost by 3, a very close game. And it was like, okay, well, that was the best you're going to see from Vanderbilt. They came back and lost to Alabama on their home court. I mean, they're just – I think Bryce Drew's a good coach, but they're just lacking in scores. When you get them in the half court, they just don't have anybody, really, that can get his own shot. They don't have – I mean, Matt Ryan is a decent three-point shooter, but, I mean, you know – he's not a factor if he's not wide open. So they're just so limited. And, I think Mike White, he did a great job at Louisiana Tech. And, you see a lot of these guys that do really good at mid-major schools. They get that plum job, and they just come up a little bit short. And he may be, it's not that he's a bad coach, but for whatever reason, stuff hasn't worked out well at Florida. I think Florida's biggest problem is what happened to Jalen Hudson. Last year he was a transfer from Virginia Tech, had a good year last year. He's completely a non-factor this year, his senior year, which I don't know what the deal is, but, he was a guy that should have been averaging 17, 18 points a game for them this year, and he's barely a factor. And if he ever gets it straightened out, they'll become much better offensively. But as it is now, they just don't have a lot of weapons. But the one thing they do is play defense. And if Florida shows up defensively, which they usually do on their home court, it's going to be tough for Vanderbilt. I'm not sure that it's tough to lay points with Florida for sure, but I think it's a bad matchup for Vanderbilt. And like I said, against Arkansas, they played their hearts out. Still came up short. They didn't win it. I didn't think they had a great effort against Bama last time out, and it's going to be tough for them on the road again. I think the problem with Vanderbilt here is if they get down early in the first half, it could turn into a blowout.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the game against Alabama for the Commodores. Was that over the weekend? And, I mean, their confidence is shot. They're a winless SEC team that when someone throws a punch, they're not responding well. And I really worry about teams like that in hostile environments.
And that was a game against Alabama. They should, that was a game that they could have won. Alabama's been horrible on the road all year. Like I said, Vanderbilt was coming off their best effort in quite a while against Arkansas. I mean, they had a really good effort against Tennessee at home, and
yes,
they had a good one on the road. And you thought, well, okay, here's a chance for them to get a win against Alabama. Instead, like you said, they didn't look confident and came out flat. So it seems like it'd be hard for them to come up with a big effort against a good defensive team on the road here.
Yeah, and we've talked about both these squads struggling to score. This total sitting at 131.5, and it really hasn't moved all day. Brent, you got to take on the total tonight between Vandy and Florida.
I would definitely, I would look under. I mean, anytime any Florida game, my first inclination is to look to play it under. The problem is you don't get a lot of value because everybody else is looking to play Florida under as well. But in this situation, that would definitely be the only way I could play. And at 135, I'm probably playing it. At 131, 131.5, you don't have a lot of value.
You are very strong in college basketball overall. But particularly strong in your region. Anybody in the smaller conferences this year, and there's some good basketball in some of the smaller southern conferences, anybody impress you as a team that's going to go in and spring one of those upsets in the NCAA tournament?
Murray State, maybe?
How about Lipscomb?
Everybody's aware of Murray State.
What about Lipscomb?
Lipscomb was going to be the one that I said. And Lipscomb is a fun team to watch. I mean, they're not they're not super athletic. But they don't play slow. They're not like a Princeton offense. They get it up and down the court. They've got one guy that's fringe NBA prospect. Is a 6'8" guy that can shoot the three, and but Liv's